Welcome to the Tech Talks Daily Podcast, where you can learn and be inspired by real-world examples of how technology is transforming businesses and reshaping industries in a language everyone can understand. Here is your host, Neil C. Hughes.
Welcome back to the Tech Talks Daily Podcast, and once again, a big thank you to my loyal listeners who pointed out a few errors that I made during my trip to Vegas last week. In a nutshell, I reached episode 1099 of this podcast, and instead of labelling the next episode 1100 and 1101, 2, 3, 4, 5, I found myself going back to 1001, 2, 3, 4, 5. Oops, maybe I can blame it on the jet lag. I'm just glad I've got you all as a second pair of eyes as well as ears, so thanks once again for accompanying me on this journey. Now, I don't know if I'm being brave or reckless, but this week Sony and Amazon have said they're not going to attend MWC, the Mobile World Congress, over in Barcelona because of the coronavirus, and they're going to release announcements on YouTube instead. And on that same day, I got an invite to attend MWC in Barcelona. So whether I am brave, bold, or completely reckless, or even stupid, remains to be seen. But in the words of Freddie Mercury, the show must go on. So before I smother myself in anti-bac gel, I want to take a time out today to explore how brands can use neuroscience to adapt their storytelling, and also learn more about the value of multisensory experiences in marketing and how brands can become more human. Not to mention the impact of neuroscience and what that could have on your social media strategy. Does that sound a little more intriguing than yet another digital transformation story? Whew, glad you said that. So let me take your ears all the way to Berlin, where we're going to speak with a neuroscience consultant at HeyHuman. But enough from me. Let's get her on the show now. So a massive warm welcome to the show. Can you tell the listeners a little about who you are and what you do?
Sure, yeah. Thanks for having me on today. So my name is Aoife McGuinness, and I'm a neuroscience consultant for HeyHuman. And HeyHuman is a behavioural communications agency based in London. And my role essentially is heading up the neuroscience offering for the agency.
Now, what instantly attracted me to HeyHuman was the fact that it is a behavioural communications agency. It got me intrigued straight away. So can I ask that you set the scene and tell listeners exactly what that means and the kind of problems you're solving for brands at HeyHuman?
Yeah, sure. Yeah. So I guess why we call ourselves behavioural communications agency, and actually now we're starting to kind of zoom out even further and kind of be a bit more broad and call ourselves a transformative communications agency. But the offering is still the same. We still focus on behaviors because we believe, changing perceptions isn't enough. And if you really want to connect with people, you need to really understand how they behave and what motivates them, what's blocking them from change. So essentially, that's why we focus on behaviors. I guess it's a real understanding of how people operate in the world today. And so I guess the agency, started about 5 years ago, and they really just recognized that the world has changed. We're so overloaded now in a world of digital and social content, and the relationship between people and brands have changed. And so it's not enough just to kind of a unidirectional way of communications that was so often in kind of TV ads, let's say, and that sort. So this is kind of recognizing that the world has changed, and so too should how brands communicate with people. And so the kind of behavioral part is all focused around behavioral economics. So that's a large part of kind of the engine room of the agency. And so all the kind of briefs we do, all the kind of problems we do, we always focus it on from a behavioral point of view. So we focus on what behavior we're trying to change. Then we look at the barriers that are getting in the way of that behavior, and any comparisons we can make to kind of to help open up this problem. So that's just kind of a very simple way of how we address all the kind of briefs and projects in the agency. And then the kind of neuroscience lens kind of complements that quite well. Often a lot of people kind of speak of this kind of system 1 and system 2 thinking, which you may have heard of, which is essentially the Daniel Kahneman's, who won a Nobel Prize in behavioral economics. And he recognized that people often, are very much in this kind of system one thinking, this fast automatic thinking. And, there's stats to say that something like 95% of our decisions are made kind of subconsciously, that we're not often aware. And yet, the system two thinking is difficult thinking, is kind of rational. And we tend to avoid that because, we tend to go for as little effort as possible, generally as humans. So it's about essentially understanding that a lot of our decisions are in the system one mode, and neuroscience helps us get answers tapping into that system one, because often kind of traditional focus groups and research asks people in a system two state of mind, so kind of an irrational post-rationalization, and that's filled with kind of cognitive biases, and it perhaps isn't such a direct way to get to the actual truth of why people do what they do. So yeah, that's kind of how the behavioral piece comes in, linked with behavioral economics and neuroscience.
And like you say there, changing the perception is just no longer enough, especially in a digital world where we're all surrounded by white noise. But I'm curious, what's the story behind that approach and the agency, and what was the inspiration? Was it about you drawing from your own experiences, or was it something completely different?
Yeah. I think, to be honest, that you've kind of hit the nail on the head. It was essentially recognizing, a colleague of mine about 5 years ago, the agency already kind of had rebranded and really had kind of refocused on the behavioral economics piece. But the neuroscience piece came up very, very naturally, actually. A colleague of mine was kind of recognizing, like, wow, the amount of tech we're kind of absorbing on day in, day out information, he used to kind of tweet me at 5 a.m. with new tech updates and, this is happening in the world, And at some point he was like, whoa, what is all this connectivity and messaging doing to our brains? So did a bit of a dive and during that period and realized, wow, actually, this could be really affecting us, and then kind of that brought us on a totally different journey then. We looked at neuroplasticity in tech and why brands have to change. So we ended up speaking at South by Southwest, like 2015, I think it was, about that topic. And that whole scene kind of really inspired us as an agency to go, wow, actually, why are people communicating the same when the whole landscape has changed? And that kind of personally motivated me as well to go back and study neuroscience, which is what I did. And so that's kind of been the HeyHuman journey, let's say. And now we've, it's a kind of an integral part of our offering as an agency. It's now we have a kind of a complete like neuroscience research lab there. We're doing research constantly for clients and other brands. And yeah, it's crazy that it's such a change in these space of years, but I think it's been really crucial to adapt because and I think the challenging thing is that not many people are. I mean, it's kind of crazy when you think of so many agencies still operate the same even though things have changed completely. So yeah, we're definitely ahead of the game on that one.
And what was your South by Southwest experience like? Because I am fortunate to travel to a lot of events all over the world, but that one's eluded me so far, and it's high on my bucket list. Is it as good as it looks?
Yeah, I mean, I've kind of been there a couple of times now. We actually spoke last year as well. So last year was quite interesting. We did a talk on called Advertising Detox and How to Reduce Cognitive Load. And I think it's definitely a conference where you can be a little bit nerdy. So like, people want that kind of the depth. People want a kind of a topic you haven't seen it before. And I definitely experienced that when I was there, kind of as a punter, let's say 5 years ago. I really went, most of the talks I went to were not from people from my industry. They were from people from MIT, people from like NASA. And it was just a really great melting pot of ideas and inspiration, and there's really just a great buzz about the place when you're there. There's lots of information spreading. Of course there's a lot of you can once you kind of get a bit savvy to the types of talks and panels that will just be spouting kind of just subjective opinions, which are okay, but it's such a huge festival. It's about kind of navigating your way and trying to find the quality within it, but there's definitely a lot of quality there. And a lot of brand presence and stuff. But no, it's an interesting space to be, I think, for sure. And they still have, despite its kind of growth and kind of perhaps takeover with branding and everything else, there's still a lot of really good quality content there.
Excellent. And speaking of branding, we're going to have business leaders and brands listening all over the world to our conversation here. So for those people, how can brands use neuroscience to adapt their storytelling in a digital age?
Yeah. So as I kind of mentioned before, the first side of this is the research side. So it's kind of often we are judging our content with subjective opinions, or we're putting them into traditional research, and we're just seeing if it's going to sink or swim based on people's opinions that they perhaps are telling you they're telling you what you want to hear, or they're influenced by what the group has said. So that's kind of one aspect of it, but it's also kind of working up further up the chain as well. So not only do we kind of research finished products, so finished content, it's also kind of going further up the stream, so understanding what kind of concepts and topics motivate people and what's interesting. But it's also just applying what we know about the brain more generally to how we treat brands and storytelling. We actually did last year a piece around the neuroscience of storytelling, and we were really focusing on, actually, why are stories so compelling? I mean, the interesting thing about stories is that it's such an integral part of of being human. From when we bring it back to the cave paintings, all the way up through to religion and to novels, paintings, till today to cinema, they all follow the same kind of thread of we want to connect with people, and stories is a very compelling way to do so. I think the interesting thing for brands to learn is when you kind of look at today the stories that have been successful and why. So even looking at in the last year or so, the success of Greta and her climate call, like so much of that often, one of the problems for so many years with that kind of a change, that kind of an abstract topic, let's say, as climate change, is that there's no really character to cling on to. It's kind of a concept that you can kind of say, oh God, I should do something, but and that's one of the really integral things of storytelling, to connect it. So we need to really, really feel like there's a human behind it, and that we can connect in with the values and story of that. But there's also a sense of kind of going on a journey, the kind of the typical at the start, the problems, the trials and tribulations that kind of bring us into we get absorbed into a problem. We find problems generally more interesting than kind of excitement and success, because problems signal to fear in our environment or some danger perhaps. And so when Greta opens a speech and says, I want you to panic, there's a reason why we kind of really kind of connect with her character, because we empathize with her emotion, and we go on that journey. And throughout her many speeches and her story till today, she still captivates people. And I think that what our takeout for brands on that was really understanding your story as a brand and being authentic. And often people are so easy to tell when brands are kind of fabricating a story that doesn't seem part of their DNA, that doesn't really, the most compelling stories is when it really feels authentic. Greta's tears are not fake. You really connect with her on that level. And so, we had this interesting conversation on whether brands should have a big purpose and story if it's not part of their values. There's no point kind of shining something on the outside if actually how the business operates isn't like that. And often you're doing yourself a disservice. Pepsi was the classic example when they tried to have this big, moral high ground with the Kendall Jenner ad. People were just, it had the opposite effect. People didn't connect with it. So it's really important just to be true. And I think a brand who does this really well is Patagonia. Patagonia have, any of their initiatives they're doing is completely reflected back on how the company operates. They're not trying to just, promote sustainability to promote sales. It's promoting sales, but for sure they're also acting like, one of the biggest demonstrations of that was last year when the company saved something like 200 million in tax cuts. So when Trump essentially took all the tax, and the money they saved on the tax they didn't pay, they donated it to environmental causes. So wow, I don't think every company can be expected to do that, but it really shows that they have the right to kind of to tell the story that they're telling, and for that reason people believe it. It's authentic, and that's what we can learn about it. It's about singing your story that's true and authentic, and it doesn't always necessarily have to have a higher purpose if that's not reflected in actual how the company operates.
So true what you're saying there, because it almost feels in many areas of the industry that sustainability is becoming somewhat of a selling point. But like you say, if you've not got that authenticity and your actions speak otherwise, it's counterproductive, isn't it?
Totally. Yeah, totally. I mean, people kind of, now more than ever, there's so much transparency. People are very thorough in their investigations of people, of companies' businesses and stuff. And so, I mean, it's good in the sense of, you can't fake the story if it's not there. And it kind of really gives companies the opportunity to think, okay, well, what if we want to talk about this? What real action can we do? There's no point just jumping on the bandwagon and making a nice case study video about something that didn't really have a big impact. Think about what actually you can do and I think that's going to, more than ever, people are really voting with their dollar, as they say. So I think that's going to help brands, the kind of really acting rather than just pretending.
And I had a guest on the podcast, I think it was about a year ago, where they were using the traditional billboards from our old analog world and transforming them into works of art that were then made Instagrammable, shareable across digital channels. And I thought it was quite fascinating about how this analog and digital world could actually complement each other. But can you tell me more about the value of multisensory experiences in marketing? Because I know that's something that you're exploring as well, isn't it?
Yeah, for sure. I think that's a really interesting example you've just given as well, because, now more than ever, so much of our lives is through a screen. Even our conversation right now is through technology. And so as a result, we're really yearning for real world experiences. We're really yearning for, sales of vinyl have gone up. People are going to analog photography just to feel like they have something physical in their hand. So now more than ever, because we are so bombarded and we are completely overloaded in the content we're consuming on our devices, it makes sense to think about the real world. And, that's one of the reasons why HeyHuman is kind of quite focused on also experiential marketing, because we really believe that absorbing people, not just visually and with kind of audition, but also with smell, touch, everything else in a 3D space, is a way more engaging an experience and perhaps way more memorable than just passively glimpsing some type of content on your phone. As the world becomes more digital, actually what we're seeing as well is the kind of flip side happening. So we're almost getting, some parts of our lives are over digitizing, and then other parts we're really becoming more and more real world. And I think as a result, we're expecting more from real world experiences. Like even if you look at certain kind of activities, people now are like, for example, secret cinema, which is, this kind of immersive theater experience where you go through kind of a film, but you have actors popping out, or, even supper clubs that they have different things happening throughout that, a sense of smell, touch, sight, taste. And I think we're now, going to concerts more, and we're expecting more of that like live experience. So I think as a result, it's an opportunity for brands for sure. It means that, every brand, I think they need to have some type of real world presence. Because, because what we know from how memory structures are built and how we reinforce that is that it's not enough alone to just kind of, to have a digital fingerprint, let's say. It makes such a difference to kind of have that availability in the real space as well around us, and how that kind of builds up to kind of people's kind of memory of a brand and interaction with a brand.
And you mentioned so many great points already about sustainability, authenticity, and over-digitized areas, and people wanting that real-world presence and to be able to smell, touch, and experience things. But if a brand was to come to you and say, in a tech-obsessed world, how can we become more human? How do you help them with that?
Yeah, this is actually something we've been really speaking about a lot recently. And as HeyHuman, our whole thing is that we speak human. We kind of understand that. So I think for us, it's about, as we kind of spoke about before, it's, what is the voice of the brand? What is it? There's no kind of point kind of putting on a layer of a human voice that doesn't really feel like the brand. So I think it's about, being really kind of true to the values of the brand and trying to find a way that connects with people. So it's kind of, I guess it's working both ways. It's understanding the people who you want to connect with, really understanding their needs, their behaviors, who they are, and then being really true to yourself as a brand and kind of understanding how you can add value to their lives. What are the places where you can add value and you're not interrupting, or you're not just, giving things that they perhaps don't need or don't. So I think it's just a really kind of true conversation about that. And then it's a lot of kind of more executional stuff, about, for example, language of the brand. How can you kind of become a little softer with that? Again, real world experiences feels very human. Kind of not just existing in this kind of ethereal realm of a brand image, being very true, being very kind of, kind of physical in the world as well, I think makes a difference. So I guess it really depends on a brand. A financial services brand version of HeyHuman is going to be very different to perhaps a soft drinks version of HeyHuman. But I think the kind of theory behind it's still the same. It's about being really authentic and finding ways to connect with people that genuinely adds value, and because essentially, if once you connect with people, they will actually listen. And it becomes, instead of pushing information, it becomes kind of a bi-directional conversation.
And there does seem to be an increasing awareness around social media platforms at the minute, and the kind of tricks that they're playing to keep people on the platforms and endlessly scrolling. So what kind of impact does neuroscience have on a social media strategy? And by that, I mean a more positive impact.
Yeah, I think, it's a really interesting topic for us at the moment. And I think that's one of the reasons last year we kind of had this idea around advertising detox and how do we reduce cognitive load. So cognitive load is essentially the amount of kind of effort our working memory has to deal with in any moment in time. And obviously social is a kind of an influx of many messages. And what is so interesting is that we almost we surrender ourselves to these platforms. We're not the type of so essentially the state of mind we're in when we're scrolling, it promotes this, as I was speaking to before, this system one, this kind of automatic kind of, we're not really in control. It's very subconscious mind, and the type of messages we're taking in there. So how we're taking in messages there is very different from how when we're watching TV and we see an ad. It's a kind of very different state of mind, and we allow ourselves to be led. It's almost like going out into the ocean and not swimming. Just letting yourself go with the tide, and we almost become, I don't want to say victim, but it's very easily, let's say, to let the waves take us away when that. And of course, the fact that we have a continuous scroll, there's never any end, there's no time. You almost it's like being inside a casino without any windows or clocks. You're kind of all of a sudden become trapped in this. And I think, for us, it was like, what it really taught us was wow, there's the reason why these platforms are so successful is for all these reasons, that we're not in control, that we really surrender, and we want to be kind of we want to escape into the screen for a minute or two. But I guess it also showed us the role for brands on social is kind of often when people are shouting or trying to kind of really bring in their message, perhaps it's doing something completely opposite, giving people a little bit of breather room. One of the ads I kind of have come across in the last year I really liked was from the meditation app Calm. And on Instagram, they just had this video that would autoplay with soothing sounds. And they had this kind of circle that was kind of completing in 10 seconds and saying, take a deep breath in, take a deep breath out. And as soon as that did, it really just jarred me in my spot. And I was like, wow, that's really nice. But it also made me kind of wake up and go, get off your phone, breathe, go outside. So yeah, it's a really interesting one. I think there's becoming more and more awareness of that. And I think, even recently we were kind of exploring this idea of, why we all do it. And I think it even just goes back to what, Daniel Kahneman says, even though he was the expert in knowing about this whole system one, system two brain, this, that is a victim to all these biases, even knowing it doesn't mean that you can kind of prevent it. I know all the tricks of social media, and I still search for that, because we're still searching for kind of a mental break, let's say. But it's about kind of, understanding yourself a bit more. And to be honest, I have actually a lot of preventative things to help make me stop going on my phone, because there's lots of, the thing is that behavior change is driven by past reward. And I know that going on Instagram, going onto my phone is a quick reward, and I know I'll get it. Whereas continuing working on my laptop, the reward is going to be a lot more long term. It's like offering someone €100 an hour, €200 in a week. Yeah. Even though I know the reward I can get that's quick is not as good, but it's just nicer because it's more tangible. It's easier to get now. So, for example, I don't even have any of the social media apps on my phone anymore, but I still log on via the browser. Like, I've done things in the past, like making everything grayscale, which has massive impact. Like, you put your phone on grayscale, and all of a sudden it's not so appealing. You don't get as many kind of dopamine hits with the colors and the lights and the shiny stuff, because it all becomes black and white, and all of a sudden your colorful laptop is more interesting. So I think it's just fascinating to accept that we are, in essence, most of the time, kind of, primates just navigating the world, and we're not these rational, conscious beings that we think we are, and it's an illusion of control we have. So it's just being very conscious of that and kind of allowing yourself a little bit of escapism, but also making sure it doesn't take over.
Oh man, you've given me a few things to think about there, about my own behaviour. But do you have any examples or client stories that you could possibly share with everyone listening today that just help them understand the kind of difference that you're making with them and all your brands there?
Yeah, sure. So let me see. I mean, in terms of real world experience, we've done a lot with Guinness in Africa. So we created a couple of different real world experiences to do exactly that, to get people off their phones and into the world. So one of them was flavor rooms, and that was essentially a multisensory experience whereby we tried to dramatize the taste of Guinness in a physical space. So we kind of really brought out the kind of smell, the texture, the kind of taste, everything into space, and do that in kind of an abstract way, interpretation with dancers, colors, kind of different bits of technology. So it became kind of a multisensory playground, so to speak, to do that, which was quite cool. Another thing we've done was night football. And that's more recent in Africa. And that was around kind of really getting people's sense of community to, essentially it was a football league at nighttime where, and we kind of played around with a lot of kind of UV lights and stuff to, again, having this, because we know that one of the things that people really love about the Premier League and football is that kind of sense of community of coming together and supporting something. So we were trying to make that a bit more tangible for people. So actually allowing them to play football too. And then, we're also doing a lot of work at the moment with kind of raw pet food brand, Nature's Menu and True Instinct. One of my favorite campaigns in the last year was the poo bag challenge. And that was essentially, appreciating that one of the main drivers of, one of the main pain points for dog owners is the kind of consistency of the poo, let's say. And but the point is that no one wants to say that word. No one, it's kind of such a taboo. And essentially it was a kind of a campaign around trying to understand, saying that, when you eat our food, you're going to have no problems in that department. And it was kind of this kind of, it really cut through, and it really got people thinking. And actually, it really understood it was a very human thing to do for, these kind of pet food brands where you often just have the dogs running around joyfully in a field, which is all lovely, but to actually get down to what it means for an owner to have a dog and the reality of that day to day. So that again was kind of an experience I did. And I thought it was just a really, really interesting way to kind of cut through. So to be honest, it's our work is very varied throughout. We do TV ads, we do experiential, social, a bit of everything. And the neuroscience stuff kind of plays into all of that. It kind of goes in not just in the kind of researching of concepts to understand, what language connects with people, what motivates people, but also kind of more from a kind of a broader piece of insights into behavior change, insights into multisensory experiences and that kind of thing. So I guess it touches many, many aspects of our work.
And I'm glad you mentioned that taboo topic there, because it's a subject close to my heart as a dog owner myself. In fact, only this morning I was walking my dog and picking up his, poo, but with a plastic bag. And it quickly occurred to me that we've eradicated plastic bags from just about every aspect of our lives, but not that area. So maybe that's something we should be tackling too.
Yeah, that's a really interesting point. Yeah, I don't know if they've tackled that either yet. So I should pass on the thought, because, although I think some things in life are, not worth it with a paper bag. So, we may have to find another material for that.
Now, as a forward-thinking company, though, I'm curious, what excites you about the road ahead with HeyHuman and the unique approach that you take?
So what I'm really excited about HeyHuman is essentially our pushing our neuroscience offering and kind of growing it this year and beyond. So one of the things we're launching is this human connection index. And essentially, it's kind of a range of neuroscience metrics that we've put together into a score that allows people to really understand if their content is connecting with people or not. So the type of things we look at is engagement in the brain, motivation, and memorization. And this will kind of allow us to kind of really drill into, what we believe is the most important thing. In a world where everyone speaks about engagement, we're really speaking about connection, because that's in the end is what's going to drive behavior change. But it's not just that, we are still very much focused on the creativity aspect of that. And we genuinely believe that, in the end, it's not created by its numbers. What really wins is a good creative idea and really understanding the human insight to make that. And we actually kind of have a formula now. I shouldn't say that, but I guess a term how we describe what we believe is the kind of best type of creativity, and that's unusual every day. And what we mean by that is, often we say that people are attracted to novelty, but we also like familiarity, right? So we like the day to day. We like to kind of have our tea the way we like it in the morning. We buy the bread we like. We have the butter we want. We like that. Familiar is good and safe, and but often we want a little bit of a kick. We don't want to always know. We always don't want to predict what's going to happen in the film. We don't want to know what's going to happen in that jazz bit of music. And so the same is exactly applies to most art. So I think in Hollywood, they call it surprising familiarity, something like that. The fact that the kind of structure of a film, but you still get surprised when it happens anyway. So our version of that is unusual every day. And that's how we kind of essentially apply our neuroscience insight into creative ideas. So it's about how do you kind of do something slightly familiar, but then give a twist on it. How do you, and those ideas tend to be the best, one of the things we worked on in the last couple of years was for a cider brand. And it was kind of a natural cider brand that was cloudy, Addleston's. And one of the fact that it was cloudy, a lot of people found it as a barrier because they said, oh God, it doesn't look. And so we were trying to really show the naturalness of the brand. And one of the ideas was free range cider. So it was about, applying something that people already know with eggs and applying that to cider. And so, wow, okay, that's a reason why this is nature, natural and good. So it's just a really small twist on it, but it kind of, it connects to people. And the point is that often people don't really have the headspace to connect with brand. Often the reality is that we are interrupting people. So, it's about, I don't think it's we actually have research to show that sometimes the most bizarre ads don't go through. Well, they do. What they do is what tends to happen is people will go, wow, that was an experience, but they won't know which brand it was for. Or it's a very kind of risky area. Sometimes you can go through, or sometimes it can go completely over people's head because it was too much work. It was too much cognitive effort, let's say. So it's about getting that sweet spot in between work and easiness. And yeah, I guess we're really kind of launching this year into this idea of unusual every day, and this idea of human connection.
And I suspect we are going to be leaving a lot of people listening thinking about how they can achieve that unusual everyday ethos. So for anyone that wants to dig a little bit deeper, can you just point them in the direction of where they can find you guys online, and also contact your team if they are left with any questions?
Yeah, for sure. So you can check us out on heyhuman.com. And so we have a contact page there. I'm Aoife McGuinness. So you can email me directly at aoife.mcguinness@heyhuman.com. And we're available also on all the usual social channels like LinkedIn, Twitter, and Instagram.
Fantastic. Well, I, for one, have learned so much today, whether it be about multisensory experiences, how brands can be more human, and the impact of neuroscience. It's a fascinating topic, and I suspect you've also left people from all over the world thinking a little bit differently too. So thank you so much for taking the time to come and share your story with me today.
Thanks so much for having me. It was a pleasure.
For me, HeyHuman is so much more than a transformative communications agency that specialises in neuromarketing and the experiential. Because I love how they're focusing on creating unusual every day and giving birth to ideas that connect with people, and also how they're helping brands grow by just thinking differently about people, brands, marketing, and so much more. And I think there were so many big talking points there that have gotten me thinking differently. But I'm curious, what about you all listening all over the world? What were your big talking points after listening to that conversation? And are there any opinions that you'd like to share with me and everyone listening, or any particular insights, or indeed a quick question for me or today's guest? Whatever it is, remember you can always reach me directly at techblogwriter@outlook.com. My Twitter, LinkedIn, Instagram, everything is at Neil C. Hughes, and you can find my website, techblogwriter.co.uk. If you would like to find out more information about today's guests, links to social channels and all that, and over 1,100 other interviews. Whatever it is, I think we've got you covered. But again, if not, let me know. But that's it for today. So a big thank you, as always, for tuning into this podcast every single day. I know it's a big ask. I know I'm probably competing with a lot of big name podcasts out there, but it does mean a lot. So thanks for listening. And until next time, don't be a stranger.
Thank you for listening to the Tech Talks Daily Podcast with Neil C. Hughes. Remember, technology works best when it brings people together.